Right behind me is a 2018 Chevy Camaro, and we have a supercharger kit to install on this bad boy. Obviously, we got it strapped on the dyno for now. We're gonna make a couple runs as is, see what kind of power she's making. We're gonna go ahead and install the supercharger kit, and from there, we're gonna see how much we gained. Should make some good power. Alrighty, so we got our base numbers in. We made 2 quick runs on the dyno. We made 413 wheel horsepower and we made around 426 foot-pounds of torque. But for this guy, he wants to go with a supercharger and add even more. So now that we know what it makes now, I'm really curious to see what it'll make with the supercharger on it. And that's exactly what we're gonna do now. Get this thing off the dyno and start taking it apart and get a plan together to install the supercharger. So with this installation, before we even get to taking stuff off the car and disconnecting the battery, we got our tuner hooked up right here. Basically, we're on HB Tuner's website and we're gonna go ahead and sync it. We're gonna let this thing do its thing, and at the end of it, we should get a message saying it's successfully updated. And there we have it. Now we're gonna go ahead and take this and the computer and plug it into the OBD2 port and hopefully start communicating with the vehicle. Right now we're just pulling the information out of the vehicle. So as far as the RTD process goes, we have now completed the first step, which is sending them the stock file. They're gonna go ahead and do what they need to do. So real quick, just to give you guys a base overview of what all is included with this kit. Obviously we have our supercharger pulley, we have our supercharger belt and belt drive components. We have a new crank pulley, air intake system, we have a coolant reservoir for our heat exchanger right here, and then some of the plumbing and stuff for that, and a bunch of other miscellaneous little things like brackets and connectors and all that. First order of business is opening up the trunk. We're gonna get to the battery, disconnect the battery, and then we can go ahead and start draining the coolant, pulling the front bumper and front fascia off of this car. Now that we got the wheel off, we're gonna go ahead and take out all these little fasteners here and just pull the fender liners out. All right, all our hardware is out. Just work the fender liner out of there, and there we go. So we got the skid plate set aside as well with the hardware. There's 3 7mm bolts on each side that secure the front bumper to the car. Go ahead and take those out on each side. Got our bolts out across the top, and now we're gonna go ahead and just jack this side up, pull this wheel, and do the same thing that we did over on that side. Now that we got the front fascia off of the car, now we can actually get into the engine. I popped off the coolant cap here just so we can drain the rad. All right, so we disconnected some of our lines here. Pull the air filter out, set that to the side. Pop the air box out here, just like so. Go ahead and take off our air intake pipe. Get that out of the way. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and remove this contraption. Now, I believe this is one of those things that delivers, intake noise inside of the car. Really hate these and think it's a really stupid idea. Go ahead and just take this plug and shove it in there like so. We can kind of just grab this hose and flip it towards the back so it's kind of out of our way. Now this will be the last time this is ever on the car. I'm gonna go ahead and take off the beauty covers. On these coil pack harnesses on each side, there are 4 zip ties holding them down. Went ahead and just cut all 4 on each side. So essentially now we're just going to be removing the intake manifold and getting it out of our way. So instead of showing you guys every single electrical connector and PCV and evap line I disconnect, we're just gonna go ahead and pull the manifold and get it out of the way because we still have a lot of work left to do with this thing. Went ahead and just covered up these ports just so we don't get anything down in there. Now we're going to be installing the supplied fuel line with the kit. This is the first, besides that little plug, aftermarket piece we are finally installing. All right, so this is the PCV valve right here. We're gonna go ahead and unthread that. I believe this is going to get relocated. Right here we have a plug on the end and we actually have to remove that plug. Alright, so right there's the plug that we threaded into to remove. So now that bottom port is open and we have a plug for the top. So we got our connections unplugged, our transcooler line off, the upper rad hose off, and some other little things to pull out the fan shroud. So right now we're going to go ahead and try to sneak this out the best we can. There we go. Alright, so now that the fan shroud's out of the way, the first thing we're going to do is find a piece of cardboard to set behind here and then move on to the pulleys. We're going to get a ratchet in here on the serpentine belt tensioner. I'm just going to go ahead and pull the belt off. So we just rotated the crank pulley until we could work this off of the AC compressor down there. So the AC belt is now off as well. We now have most of our supercharger belt, tensioner, and idler pulleys all on. We got the bracket on over here for the tensioner. Everything is looking very good. Have not pulled off the crank pulley yet and replaced that, but we are going to be working on that. And then we're also going to just pull all the coil packs off and pull the valve covers because we actually have to trim the valve covers. That way the supercharger fits. I will show you guys what that means when we get to it. We do have some spark plugs to install, so I'm going to go ahead and just check the gap on these. So we got the car up in the air now. Just an FYI for anyone curious, this does have a Borla Attack exhaust. Other than that though, it is stock headers and stock cats. Obviously, you know, if you're going for all out power, you would probably put some long tubes on. Still gonna be plenty. But right now we're just trying to get to a good spot on the flywheel so that way we can hold it. We used pretty much every impact we had to try and remove that crank pulley bolt, and that thing is just really tight, so we're gonna have to hold the flywheel somehow and then get a breaker bar on that crank pulley and get that bolt out, and then we're gonna have to install the new one and torque it while also holding the flywheel. So I got this cover popped off right here. Typically you want to unbolt the starter and go in over there. That's a little bit more work, whereas this is just a 10 mil to pull that cover off. There she is. She put up a huge fight. We got her out. We've been chugging away at this thing for pretty much all day now, making huge progress, but there's still a good bit of work left to do. Almost ready to bolt the supercharger on, and that's what I'm actually very excited for because once that baby's on there, it kind of gives you the big picture, and it's kind of what it's gonna look like. So can't get to the fun stuff yet. We still got a couple other things to do. Notice the valve covers are back on the engine. Right here is where the top coil pack mounts were. So what you got to do is actually cut them off flush, and the kit comes with brackets to kind of relocate the coil packs away from obviously the supercharger. So we got to clear as much room as we can up here. So not only did we move the coil packs down, we also actually tucked the harness down as far as we could get it on each side. All the spark plugs are in from earlier, and the crank pulley is on and torqued. So as far as all of those pulleys go, that's all done. The only pulley we have left to mess with is obviously our supercharger pulley. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw the serpentine belt on now. The AC belt is on. Did that off camera because it was a little bit of a challenge. Stretch belts usually are. I do want to mention too, you're going to want to obviously install the new harmonic balancer with the tool, and you're also going to want to remove it with the tool as well. Shroud assembly is back in, all the lines are connected. Double checked all the connected lines just to make sure we don't have any leaks on first startup. Starting to look like a motor again. And we have reached the part I've been waiting for. We're going to be unwrapping this now. It is now time to start messing with this big bad boy. All right, first up, we're gonna go ahead and take out all 19 of the bolts going around the perimeter. We're gonna pull the lid off this thing. Also underneath both the emblems, there are bolts we have to get to. So we're gonna take out the 4 Torx holding in these covers. All right, now on each side of the supercharger, we have our coolant lines. We have to remove this assembly on each side. Alrighty guys, it's officially time to install the supercharger onto the engine. There's a couple little things I had to do to the supercharger per this engine. They say if you have an LT1, do this. If you have an LT4, do this. So I kind of just followed that procedure and made sure we were all squared away for this particular application. First, we got to pull off all the tape, and we're going to give the heads a wipe down, make sure they're all nice and clean before we drop the supercharger on. I hope it is not too bad to put on because it's pretty dang heavy. Oh my god. What a unit. So right there at the corner, you can see where the valve cover is hitting the supercharger. We're gonna have to shave a lot more off of that. Now, I was under the impression that when they were cut good enough. This side, same thing. Not as hateful, but back in there, you guys won't be able to see it, but it is definitely hitting. So we need to shave down all 4 of the coil pack mounts on the valve covers again. So back apart we go. So we got the supercharger back off, just set to the side. We're gonna pull the valve covers off for the second time and just trim them down a little bit more, just so we can get this thing to fit. Alrighty, so we got the valve covers back on the motor. This time we went ahead and just milled them down. And I am very confident now that we're gonna have enough clearance on each side. We're just gonna rip up all the tape covering our intake ports and drop on the supercharger and cross our fingers that everything's good. Got her on and all torqued down. There are 10 bolts inside that bolt it to the cylinder heads. And obviously though, all the way around this thing, we have great clearance now. So got that problem fixed and figured out. All the wiring is nice and tucked. Just looks very, very good. I'm very happy now with everything, and we can go ahead and assemble the rest of this. So these little manifolds and then the coolers that we removed prior are now gonna go back in. Alright, and we're just gonna slide these in like so. Looking better and better. Now honestly the only thing left to do is throw the lid on and then the pulley. So we're gonna go ahead and throw some Loctite on all 400,000 bolts that hold the lid on. Drop that on, do the pulley, and then as far as just the supercharger goes, we're done. So we got the lid on the supercharger torqued down. Everything looks good there. We're gonna go ahead and slide this pulley on, get the bolts in, and torque this down as well. Put a little bit of extra Loctite on these. She's looking good. One last thing to do. She's pretty. Right here is the old plug for our map sensor. This harness that comes with the kit obviously is going to relocate this to where our current map sensor is. As far as the wire goes then, I'm just gonna run it with the other harness. All right, so this is the final product for our map sensor. It's just run underneath that harness going to the rear, and kind of tried to tuck and hide it a little bit. We're gonna continue forward. We have an evap harness now to throw into this. Again, one of the harnesses that comes with the kit. And by the way, for anyone wondering, this kit does have instructions too. So we're gonna take our evap harness and plug it into the OEM connector over here on the right hand cylinder head wiring loom harness wiring spot. Log it down. So over here on the driver's side we have our OEM MAF sensor. What we're gonna do is plug this into that, but before we do that, this little 90 here, this plastic piece, we have to remove that first, and then we can go ahead and plug this in. Plug in the adapter harness, and basically both the harnesses we just installed are gonna run underneath of here. Now everything is not plugged in yet, so I'm gonna wait to tuck these nice and neatly, but anyhow, that's pretty much what we're going for. And then over in here you can see our intake air temp sensor, and we have that plugged in. All right, so here's the table of parts yet to be put on the vehicle. Now I gotta say this has gone down a lot, and it's such a satisfying feeling just seeing all the parts disappear. We still have a lot more to make disappear though, and we're gonna move on to the heat exchanger part of this supercharger kit. So I'm gonna go ahead and zip out to these supports, and then also we're gonna have to unbolt and unplug the horns because they're going to be relocated as well. But in the meantime, we drilled a 1.5 inch hole right here. We're gonna go ahead and install the heat exchanger next, and that's for the plumbing. Other than that, we just had to remove a bunch of this plastic trim stuff pretty much all around this area. All right, we got the heat exchanger all mounted up. Pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty fun. We obviously have upper and lower brackets. Down here, it's got a little rubber grommet on it and a little bracket. And you can see the hardware we installed there. And then up top, we just have these brackets that we had to rivet to the actual cooler itself. And then they bolt in the factory bolt hole location there. All in all though, pretty simple, and it looks freaking good. We've been moving right along here with the install. The newest additions that we just put in are these lines here for the charge air coolers. So we have a reservoir up here, it just mounts up to the strut bar. Then we have our line going to the pump. We also mounted our pump. It's a little hard to see, but it just connects to the frame rail right there. Then coming from the pump, it feeds into the bottom of this piece right here. Other than that, we started doing some of the evap stuff, evap solenoids in. We did put the horn relocation bracket on as well. So the horns are now kind of different oriented. They're mounted in the same spot, but just enough to clear everything here. Alrighty, that pretty much brings us back up to speed with all the things I've done off camera here. Right now we're going to be installing the wiring harness for the pump down there. Alright, so the end that actually plugs into the pump, we went ahead and just tucked underneath it here. This is just going to be set aside so it's out of our way. On the back here of this bracket, there are two studs, one in the front, one in the back. We attach the relay to the back. We're going to tighten that down then. But this fuse holder here, we installed a 15 amp fuse, and then the cover, after I get it back on, is going to go on the front of that. We got the power wire on this open extra piece right here mounted. Since we're done in here, go ahead and pop the covers back on like that. Alrighty, so there's just something so enjoyable about a nicely tucked wiring harness. Anyhow, it comes down here and just follows this coolant pipe over to the other side, runs down, and then it just plugs into the bottom of this pump right here, and that finishes up the entire wiring for the coolant pump. Next step is going to be getting all the coolant lines from the supercharger back to the reservoir, from the supercharger to this feed right here, and then from side to side. So let's get to that. Pretty easy. I already can tell how they go. They're kind of laid out. The supercharger is right here. You got connection here and here, and then here and here. This is going to connect to that one that is just open, and then this is going to go to our reservoir in the back. I showed you guys the parts table not too long ago. Now look at the parts table. Not much left at all. Super happy to announce right now, we have finally finished the supercharger installation on this 2018 Camaro. This thing came out very, very good. Shout out to Magnuson, it's a good kit. Came with everything we needed, didn't have any problems, everything looks good. A lot of the stuff we just finished up was just the intake, the belt, getting some of these lines on. Now, obviously we have our OEM reservoir right here, and then the reservoir we added over here for the supercharger. So we're going to have to fill up and bleed both systems. And I do also want to mention the nose of the car is still off. Probably going to fill it up with fluids and run it and make sure everything's good. Don't know if I'm going to put that on before or after the dyno, but either way, we still have that to do. But other than that, everything is done. Alright, this thing is wrapped up. We got the new file loaded on. Cooling system's all good. We got it on the dyno. It's time to make some dyno runs. Alrighty, so after making a couple dyno runs and getting everything dialed in, this is just the estimate we got. There's numbers higher, lower a little bit, but this is just pretty much what we're guessing. We started out at 413 horsepower, and after the supercharger ended up with 536 horsepower. In addition to that, the explosion of torque is where we really gained. We are actually right around 550 to 560-ish pound-feet of torque, which is just crazy. That's a huge gain there, over 100 foot-pounds of torque. And the horsepower isn't bad either. We gained about 123 horsepower or so. So if you're watching this because you want to supercharge your 2018 Camaro, you can look at the results and decide for yourself if you want to pull the trigger on one. Obviously, we aren't quite finished up with the car. The tuning and all that kind of stuff is done. The front clip still needs put on, but you saw me take it off, and honestly, you guys are just here for the supercharger anyways, so I'm not gonna worry about showing you guys me reassembling the car. You all know what a 2018 Camaro looks like, so. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thank you guys for watching. If I did pretty good on this, let me know by dropping a comment and liking the video. Make sure you subscribe for more cool car stuff. That's about all I do. Thanks again for watching. See you guys in the next one. Peace.